Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. This is Nipasa Pradhan, and I'm going to be your host for today. And it's lovely being here. So, sorry, it's not just good afternoon. It may be good morning or good evening. So, thank you so much wherever you've joined us from whichever time zone. So, welcome to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show, and I'm really happy to be here. We are streaming live right now on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, and I'm really glad that you have joined us. And before we proceed with today's webinar, I have this very important disclaimer, and that is by watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. So, yes, and you can also participate, by the way, in this session, friends, by commenting whatever questions you have, especially with regard to today's topic of discussion. And that is Trump's new team, a fresh start or a nightmare for immigrants. I'm sure all of you folks have many questions and are probably in a dilemma whether it's going to be good or it's just going to get worse for you. So, today, here in this webinar, we are going to discuss this further, and joining me is someone who needs no introduction, who has been a part of Immigration and Jobs Talk Show, makes it a point to be here. So I'm very happy to welcome once again none other than employment based immigration law attorney, but also a true advocate for the immigrant community, from defending H1B RFEs and NOIDs to guiding students on F1 OPT visas and offering expertise on TN and E3 visas. Justin has been a beacon of hope. So please help me welcome him back to the show. Hello to Justin Rivera from Wasden Immigration Litigation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That was a very nice introduction. I appreciate it.
It's been a while, I mean, I take it for granted sometimes, and maybe I don't say good things about you or let folks out there know. So maybe we have new friends. This is none other than Attorney Justin Rivera, today's special guest, and he's going to help us today on this topic. We're going to talk a lot on Trump's new team. So before we head start, Justin, what do you have to say to everyone out there?
Well, anybody that's here that's celebrating an early happy Thanksgiving to you, because that'll be coming up this week. If you're here in the U.S. celebrating that, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you have a short work week. But yeah, in regards to today, we'll just try to delve into I think a lot of what many people are doing right now, which is trying to kind of wrap our heads around what
Mhm.
a new administration is going to look like and the impact that it's going to have on immigration in the country. And you can do that kind of by looking at who's being put in influential positions within the administration, and what have those people said about immigration, and what that possibly means they'll be actually doing moving forward.
Absolutely, friends. Thank you so much, Justin. And yes, don't forget to participate. And before that, if you have friends who would be interested in getting to know this more about today's topic, Trump's new team and its effect on immigration, please feel free to share this link with everyone or your friends out there and ask them to join in this discussion. So, yes, thank you so much once again. And let's go ahead, Justin. I have this first question. This is regarding Pam Bondi, and she has a history of aligning with Trump's agenda, including her role in his impeachment defense and her work with America's first policy institute. So, how do you foresee her policies impacting immigration cases, especially regarding federal prosecution priorities?
So I think obviously it's a fortune teller argument here of what are you predicting or what can be done, but I definitely think that there is an avenue to go after criminally, go after people that are found to have committed visa fraud. Usually, that's something that's applied to companies, organizations, usually the higher up individuals within the organization. And so, could they use that avenue moving forward more liberally than they have in the past? I definitely think it's an option. In regards to Pam Bondi, just kind of reading up on her and looking at kind of her record, I think she's probably going to be basically doing what Trump is asking her to look into. And from her perspective, I think the immediate things are probably not going to be immigration, and that enforcement of, maybe fraud allegations against individuals. Now, that's not to say that that couldn't happen, because honestly, it would be a pretty interesting tool for them to try to utilize if their goal was to actually start trying to crack down on the companies rather than the individuals, as a method of kind of limiting how some of the organizations that have been able to get away with using H1Bs would be able to use them moving forward. So I definitely think it's something to look into, and think about. I do know that, from my understanding of Pam Bondi, her relationship with Trump had something to do with I guess the fact that he gave a donation to her of like $25,000 or something like that to her reelection campaign, and not as a direct result, allegedly, but maybe the fraud investigation into Trump University in Florida was no longer something that was being discussed or put on the docket. So that's on the Washington Post. You can see the inference formed there. But what that really kind of tells me is it's like you're going to see with a lot of these appointments. It looks like it's more of a loyalty issue rather than a skills issue. It's, is this person willing to carry out what it is that he wants to put forth with his administration? And so, yeah, I would say, would it shock me if there were more cases brought against people for visa fraud, especially the employers, the people who are actually signing the H-1B forms? No, it wouldn't shock me at all. And honestly, if I were them, it would probably be something I would utilize.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin, for giving us a sneak peek into your thoughts about Pam Bondi, and thank you so much. You can also go check out the post on Washington Post, and the news is out there already. So thank you. On that note, Justin, we also have Amay on YouTube asking a question. Amay, please stay with us. We will take up your question in a bit. Hang on. For now, I have another question, and this is about Matt Gaetz. Although he withdrew his nomination, the controversy surrounding his potential appointment raised concerns. So, does the consideration of such a figure indicate a shift in how the administration might handle immigration related ethical and legal matters?
So yeah, I mean, I don't know really if we're gonna be able to frame it specifically through the prism of immigration, but I think what we saw with Gates's attempted appointment was the fact that there are still guardrails in place, regardless of how tenuous those guardrails are. There's
Mhm.
still going to be some level of qualification required for these people being put into these positions. And the fact of the matter was that Matt Gaetz, he wasn't really qualified for the position that he was going to be put into. That being
Mhm.
said, as well, would he have gotten the position were it not for his ethical issues? It's very possible. But what it really kind of does show me is that there is still going to be pushback on appointments, which is a positive thing. That people
Mhm.
still should be held to a high standard. Um, but in terms of immigration and kind of how I think it's kind of interesting, you could maybe draw this small parallel from it, but the fact that Trump was even willing to try and appoint Gates in the first place, it's not that surprising, and it's a bit indicative of his strategies. A lot of times they just kind of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. So if I'm looking at it from that way, I wouldn't be that surprised if you see a lot of quick changes to immigration that come in, and a good amount of them end up being invalidated by the courts. Just because they don't hold legal muster. So that wouldn't shock me. I definitely think that they are more willing to act and then just kind of see whether or not the court will let them act, rather than make a prepared, concise, well researched change that's going to stick. So that would be my thought process. Would be, don't be surprised if you're seeing within that first month of the administration handover, changes, fairly drastic changes and proposals that may or may not actually hold up in a court, but are still going to cause hiccups in the immigration system.
All right. It's scary how the situation is for many immigrants out there, I think. And with all these new picks, I think it's the situation is getting even more tensed. What do you say, Justin?
Uh,
Can you hear me?
yeah, sorry, the quick little hiccup right there.
No
Uh,
worries.
I
So,
gotcha. I'm here.
yeah, I was just saying, like, with these new picks, it's just getting scary. So, what do you think?
It's actually someone just commenting about. I think it's Dr. Oz was allegedly being given an appointment. No, I know, Sakshi. I know. Yeah, it's not ideal for me. I think for a lot of people who are looking at the individuals that are being named to these positions, there is a little bit of a wow factor to it because I think in the first administration, I think Trump was a little more reeled in just by the nature of the fact that like it was fairly surprising for most people that he won, and I think there was a little bit of period where the Republican Party was kind of like, we're going to put you. We're going to put guardrails up. We're going to have people appointed, Rex Tillerson. There's going to be people put in positions that are experienced and qualified and know what they're doing. What we did learn, though, from that administration was there was a pretty high level of turnover, and that turnover basically correlates to if you're not doing what he wants, you're going to lose your job. We saw it with Jeff Sessions, and then he even ended up having problems with Barr, which was another person he had appointed himself for the AG spot. So the other thing to think about too with this is kind of a shelf life. How long are these people actually going to hang in these positions? And actually stay and deal with kind of the turmoil that this administration is inevitably going to bring. So that'll be something I think we're going to have to consider as well.
Right. Right, Justin. Thank you so much. I mean, that also was a very good insight, I would say. And we have Malutek USA and even Sakshi joining us with their questions. And I think that we can take Malutek's question for now, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
So it's
sure.
asking, Canada, Australia, and UK reducing temporary issues and student visas. Why Republicans act more left than Canadian Trudeau? 10,000s of American tech workers are unemployed, desperately need job. Okay, what do you have to say?
I okay. I think so. I've been kind of monitoring the Canada situation pretty closely because I found it very interesting. So during the initial Trump administration, um, Trudeau, who is still in a position of authority, Trudeau was very open to immigration. He was basically saying, like, oh, if you're not wanted in the United States, come to Canada. We want you here. We're more than willing to take people on.
Yeah.
They looked into expanding their immigration regulations to bring in a higher influx of people. That may have come back to bite them. About probably around last year, the middle of last year was where I started seeing it. That's not to say it's
Mhm.
not something that's been existing before, but I did start seeing a lot of attention on it in the middle of last year, and it's at the forefront this year. Trudeau's already made statements that he's reversing course. They are taking steps to curtail and limit immigration moving forward. He has made the spigot argument, which he's claiming that the spigot, the water spigot, has been turned too far one way and needs to be turned back the other way. Um,
Mhm.
that's his
I've been
stance.
trying through my 34 years.
What's up?
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Um, but anyway, that's he's a politician. He's dealing with the vibe of what's going on in his country presently. But as a result, yes, I think you're seeing Canada move towards more restrictive immigration policies. Australia, I think I've also seen is possibly trying to reduce immigration. I'm not as well up on the UK. Why Republicans would act more left than Canadian Trudeau. I mean, if you're saying why would the Republican Party embrace immigration, legal immigration in the United States? Because legal immigration in the United States is beneficial to the United States economy. It's been well established. So there wouldn't be really any valid justification. I think that the whole point of these programs like the H1B program are to create the necessary guardrails that prevent U.S. workers from being kind of left out in the cold by, allowing there to be people who are going to be able to do the same job for less money. That's why you have the labor condition application that establishes the wage levels. These things are stringently enforced, both when someone applies for the H1B and through FDNS's site visit systems when they actually go out and make sure that the person's complying with the conditions of the H1B. So that all being said, it would not shock me if the Republican Party acts differently than the Biden administration. I know people are very quick to jump the gun and say, "Whoa, what has Biden actually done for legal immigration? Like, how is it that different than it was under Trump?" I will tell you firsthand, as someone who practiced under the Trump administration, it was significantly different. You were dealing with an entity in USCIS that was borderline adversarial. It wasn't more so our job is to process these applications. It was, we're looking through these applications almost with an assumption that there's something deniable in what's being presented to us. And I think that's what you're going to see as the biggest difference. And it will show you that the Republicans are not more left than any of those other countries. They are going to seek to draw out the time it takes for an application to be processed. They're going to do that using requests for evidence that I'm sure will become more detailed and
Mhm.
require more information than is currently necessary. They're going to do that by attempting to limit validity periods any way they can, meaning, they're going to probably go back to trying to find ways to cut down people's requests for 3 years. Whether or not that will hold up in court, we will have to wait and see. But I'm sure that they'll be taking from the pages that they've used previously in order to grind the system as slowly as they possibly can. On top of that, yes, it's completely possible that they're going to be introducing new ideas and new ways to try and make the system even more difficult than it is presently, with the underlying goal being that they want employers to just not have to deal with the program.
Mhm.
And if they do things like increasing the wages, making it to where you have to pay even more to have someone employed on an H1B, that's one avenue that they may look at. They may look at curtailing the definition of specialty occupation, making it more stringent to where it's more difficult to qualify for the position. They might make it harder for the employees to qualify with their degrees, unless the degrees are absolutely one to one correlated to the job duties being performed. So these are all things that they're going to do. And if they didn't do them, it would surprise me. But these are all things that I definitely think they want to do. And with Stephen Miller, who I'm not sure if we're planning to talk about today or not, but with Stephen Miller in probably a more influential position in this administration than he had been previously, all of these things are going to be on the table. And it's not really, to me, a matter of if, but when, and whether or not they've now also decided to find new things that they're going to be putting forth. I believe I saw last week, towards the end of the week, something about the dismissal of a case that had been backed by a Miller group where they were going after, once again, the H4 EAD. So it was another attempt for them to go after some part of immigration to curtail it, to make it more difficult for people that are here on that H1B visa if their spouse can't work. That didn't hold up in court. But you got to remember, they were challenging something. They're moving into a situation where they're going to be taking part in the rulemaking process. And that's going to change how they're approaching it and what they're trying to do. So all of that is to say, for Malutek, um, I don't think that the Republicans are going to be acting more left than the Canadians. I don't think that that's going to be the case at all. I think you're definitely going to see them crack down on legal immigration. It's not going to be the forefront of what gets people's attention, especially initially. Where everyone's eyes are going to be drawn is where the election seemingly was decided on in a large part, and that's the border. And the actions that are taking place at the border to curtail entry. And I think that's going to be what gets the headlines. But at the same time, it wouldn't shock me if they're able to walk and chew gum at the same time and also move forward with making those changes to legal immigration.
Right, right. Thank you so much for taking that up for Malu Tech USA, and thank you, Malu, for participating with your question.
Yeah,
But
no,
Justin, I mean,
I think it's a
yeah,
good question. I think it's also indicative of, in a lot of places, you're seeing a protectionist shift. I think you're seeing people in countries that are moving more so towards not maybe being outright anti-immigration, but being
Mhm.
more selective in their immigration process. I don't. I think to say that that is something that's moving forward in Western countries. I think to say that it would be realistic.
Right, right. But yeah, coming back to Stephen Miller, I mean, talk about his first term family separation, including travel ban and all that. So, what do you foresee? I mean, this could also, influence this term as well. So,
Mhm.
how's it going to be, you think, for immigrants?
So I think I apologize. I think we have a question on him. I don't remember the name of the border czar that has been appointed, but I remember I've heard about him. Tom Homan. Thank you.
Tom, yes.
So Homan has really talked about his ability to enforce actions at the border, right? And it's a pretty when you really think about it from an immigration perspective, when you're reviewed for admission to the United States, that's a pretty big part of a process because at that
Yes.
time you're being, assessed by an officer who makes a determination as to whether or not you are admissible to the United States, right? So for most people that are legal immigrants, this is a very quick part of a process. If you've been in before, you come in, you know what you're doing, you go through CBP, it's no problem, right?
Mhm.
Um, it wouldn't surprise me if the enforcement activities being promulgated at the border begin to bleed out into other facets of entry. And so, what I mean by that is this: I've already actually seen it. I was reading about it before our discussion today.
Mhm.
Homan has already come out and made a point about illegal immigration at the Canadian border, basically saying, yeah, there's problems at the southern border, but what about the northern border? We have issues there too. We need to be,
Right.
we need to be more stringent in how we're reviewing people there as well. And
Mhm.
so I think for a lot of people that are, that travel between Canada and the US, maybe people that are on intermittent L visas, TN visas, things of that nature, I think you're going to see a heightened level of scrutiny.
Mhm.
I think it's going to be created initially under the guise of trying to curtail illegal immigration, but it's going to bleed into the other facets of immigration as well. And I think that it's going to create a difficulty where one previously hadn't existed.
Mhm.
So I would say it's pretty imperative for people moving forward when you're getting ready to really consider traveling and how you're going to reenter, where you're going to reenter, what documents you're presenting when you reenter, and being prepared for detailed questions being asked in relation to not only that, but any of your previous immigration history in the United States as well. Because
Mhm.
I mean, we've already seen things that are popping up under the Biden administration that have been popping up for a while now, but issues with people who have been on their H's for years that are now being questioned about F1 employment with companies that have been blacklisted, basically that USCIS has now come out and basically said if you worked with this company, if you worked with this company, then you're basically de facto fraud. Like you've committed fraud based on the connection to the company. So I
Mhm.
think that is something that's going to need to be like very well thought out by people when they're immigrating or coming into the US, looking at what is it that you could be asked about in your immigration history or about your current job or any of those things that could lead to additional questioning or additional scrutiny. Because all of that I think is going to be on the table, because if you're if you're not readily prepared, you put yourself in a bad situation. You put yourself in a situation where you're going to be questioned by an officer. You may not remember some of the facts. You may misspeak one time. That's really all it takes, is one misstatement or one slip up, and it's enough to put you in a circumstance where you could be an expedited removal and end up having your visa canceled. So I don't say all of this through the desire to fearmonger. It's not my intent to make people scared to travel. I've also seen, people online already are starting to get upset. They're saying, "Oh, my attorney's telling me if I have any travel, it needs to be done before January mid-January, because they don't want people stuck by any changes that are made. This is ludicrous. I've never done anything wrong. You have to understand that as an immigration attorney, our job is to advise. And usually when we're advising, we're trying to take the most conservative approach or strategy possible, because what we want to do is minimize risk. That's our goal. We minimize the risk that an individual has, either when they apply for something, or they go to a visa interview, or they re-enter the U.S. That's the goal. Not to make you scared, just to make you informed. And I'll put it this way: if we didn't say these things, and then in the middle of January you travel and something happens and you're stuck out of the U.S., who are you going to blame? You're going to blame
Exactly.
us for claiming that we didn't tell you not to travel. And so that's why that's happening right now. It's really not because we want to make people fearful. It's more of a, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And the best idea when that's the circumstance is to just minimize the risk as much as possible. But yeah, to just kind of button that question about Homan's leadership, the border policies, I think you're just going to see a lot more difficult issues with entry that you probably weren't dealing with in the past couple of years. I just think it's going to be a lot more scrutiny. They may bring back some of the issues that had existed beforehand, which were things like, did you do a second master's degree and do day one CPT? Did you go to some of these universities that are looked at as maybe less than compliant with F1 requirements, just things like that. And then there, obviously employer issues and stuff like that. So I just think all of that's going to be on the table.
Yes, absolutely. And talk about the borders are. We can expect a lot of difficulties for sure, as we've already spoken about. Maybe RFEs getting more and more. Maybe they would want more evidence than already required. So, stuff like that is what we have been discussing. And I think there's more to discuss on this. There's so many new picks. And well, I would just like to say thank you to Pavan also for joining us with your questions. Just stay with us. We will take up your questions. All right. And yeah, Justin, getting back to our questions, earlier I had asked about Stephen Miller also, because we have seen a lot of family separations and
Mhm.
also, travel ban as well. So I think this is going to be a little more tough on immigration. I mean, immigrants now, right?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think if you're sitting on this call and you're somebody that's on, a non-immigrant visa, you're sitting there thinking, well, what is the applicability of that to me?
Hmm.
I'm not entering the country illegally. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm
Hmm.
not doing anything illegal. Okay, so that's fair. It's a fair assertion. But aside from the
Hmm.
fact that there's a whole human rights issue regarding the family separation issues. I think it was Tom Herman, is it his name? I think Tom Herman, when he
Tom
was
Homan.
asked about family separation, he said something along the lines of like, "Well, no, we're not going to separate them. We'll make sure they're deported together."
Together,
That
yes.
was the
Yes.
solve to the
Tom
Homan.
Homan.
Homan,
Homan.
thanks. I'm gonna see what's gonna suck is that's I'm not gonna remember his name, and then he's gonna be the bane of my existence for the next 4 years, and so he's gonna make sure I remember it. But yeah, but yeah, so I get that, like okay, well maybe it's not applicable to me, but I'll have you look at it from this perspective. Look at it from this perspective. I remember during the last Trump administration, something that they had tried to do at the outset was deny people's extensions and then say you're now unlawfully present, which means you're subject to you can be deported basically. And
Yes.
then there kind of became a quick run where we were kind of running around like, are they issuing notices to appear for these people? Are they going to be coming after them to
Hmm.
put them in deportation proceedings? Because people need to understand this. If your status, if you're, let's say your H1B extension gets denied and you're no longer lawfully present in the U.S., you can depart. You have an opportunity where you can leave the U.S. You have a timeline where you're able to leave, and outside of having to admit that you had a prior denial and maybe explain the denial, there's not going to be that wide reaching of a problem that comes back to bite you on that. If you were to get placed in deportation proceedings, that completely changes the game. That's a situation where if you leave without appearing in court, there's implications, you know, and then there's implications of how long do you have to stay while everything is waiting. How do you sort things out? Can you apply again to get yourself back in status? So I do understand I do understand people being like, I don't know how that's going to affect me. It can affect you because the policies, like I've kind of been reiterating on this call, that are initially utilized for people that are illegally immigrating, they can bleed out and subsequently be used in the future against people who have come into the country legally and then lose their status because, they've had a denial or something like that. So
Mhm.
while I'm very hopeful that that doesn't happen because it would just really complicate our jobs even more, it's not to say that they can't utilize that. And so
Mhm.
just thinking backwards from that, I just think that if it does happen, it's horrible. But I hope it doesn't. But I think people should be aware that it's something that I know they have on their table. It's in their arsenal of things that they might want to do.
I mean, imagine being like the second or the third generation in the country, and suddenly, like, you and your family are having doubts if you can still be in the country or not. So,
Yeah, I
I,
mean that all that stuff's frustrating. I mean, especially don't. I would not be shocked for a second during the last administration. They really cracked down on the F1 program. They did. They went a lot harder at STEM OPT than they had ever done before.
Mhm.
It wouldn't surprise me at all if they went after that again. I
Mhm.
think that it's something that because you got to think about it this way: if they want to curtail immigration, what's one of the easiest ways they can do that? They
Mhm.
stop people from coming in and doing F1s and working in the US on OPT and STEM OPT. If you cut that out of the process, then those people have to leave the country. And yes, they may still go into the lottery, but it's probably going to be harder for them to get sponsored because they're no longer working in the US. They're working
Mhm.
overseas
Mhm.
in their home countries. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's definitely on the table. It wouldn't shock me at all if they tried to come out with basically new enforcement mechanisms for the F1
Mhm.
program.
All right, let's just hope for the best and look forward. All right.
Mhm.
Well, now Justin, let's take up Rag's question. He's here on YouTube. He's saying, "Hi, Napasa and Justin. With a flurry of cases coming in, will the attorney's efficiency be compromised, resulting in more RFE or rejections?"
So I don't know if it'd be the attorney's efficiency that creates the issue with RFEs. The issue with RFEs are you prepare a petition as best you can. You try to cut off all lines of inquiry where they reasonably exist. But if you're dealing with a circumstance where the goalposts are being moved constantly and in real time, it's going to create problems. And that's what creates the increase in RFEs. You know, things like changing how you look at specialty occupation or how you make that definition. Things like how you look at how someone qualifies for a position, trying to reintroduce things like, project documents or proof of specialty occupation work. Those are all the things that are, in my opinion, are going to lead to an increase in requests for evidence. That's really the big issue with it. I think that the goal is not only to just increase the probability of denials, it's to increase the time that it takes to go through the process. It's to draw this out and make it more difficult so that it becomes a circumstance where employers just don't want to deal with it. I think that's really the underlying goal, and that comes from mucking up the system by making things harder when they shouldn't be. When it comes to rejections, rejections are circumstances where when you're filing a case, there's something missing in the case or deficient, or it's sent to the wrong location. Those are things that typically an attorney should be able to deal with, regardless of what administration is in a position of authority. Where that could become problematic, just speculating here, because we've already seen it with Biden in some regards, is just changing things. You know, making quick changes to forms and saying, actually, you know what, you got to use this form edition, and we're not going to backdate it, so you got to start using it as of December 1st, and the form came out on November 26th. Well, if you're a normal, business immigration attorney, you've probably got X amount of cases pipeline that have already gone through that process, went to the client for signature, and they're in line to be filed. If you don't catch those before they go out, those will be rejected. So that's definitely something that could happen. Just making constant, updates and alterations to the forms. But at the same time, if that's going to be something that they do, then it's going to become incumbent on the attorneys to make sure that they're doing their due diligence at the time of filing, to make sure that everything that goes out is correct and proper. Because that's really the only way you're going to combat it. The other thing they can do too is they can move around the mailing locations, which is annoying, but we do
Mhm.
try to stay on top of that as much as possible. That's a lot. Ayla deserves credit for that. Ayla does a lot with making sure that any of those changes that happen are kind of blasted out to the attorney so that we're aware of it. But those are avenues that they could take to
Right.
increase rejections.
Yes, I mean, changes and updates, these are very, very important things, and it's very important to stay updated. So, folks out there, just keep on researching and keep looking out for new changes. Because, I mean, I remember we had a lot of fee changes, and like you said, address changes, Dropbox location change, and stuff like that.
Right.
And this led to a lot of, I mean, cases becoming invalid because of the wrong fee and etc.
Right.
etc.
And so that's another one too that obviously like when you talk about mechanisms to make the process more difficult, fees are such an easy one, you know. Fee
Right.
increases are always a great way to hit the bottom line of the sponsoring petitioner. So,
Hmm.
if they're able to kind of combine increasing fees with shortening validity periods,
Yes.
that's a win-win for them because it puts them in a circumstance where they're really making it harder for the employer.
Right.
But yeah, that would be my answer to that, Raj. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, Rag, for participating. And if you have any more questions, we're still here. So, Justin, my next question, this is about Pete Hexet's political appointment as defense secretary. You know, this brings attention to his hardline stance on national security. So, do you think this could lead to increased militarization of immigration enforcement? And what might that mean for immigrants at the border?
So I will say this. This is actually something I've really been thinking about. Maybe not necessarily for the border, but it's something that has been crossing my mind. And that is, what is the impact on legal immigration of increased conflict abroad, whether that be in Europe or in the Middle East? You know, do we see some sort of proclamations coming out as a result of those conflicts, limiting immigration for people from those countries, or limiting immigration overall? I say that as someone who we had a discussion before this call, for something I had just been dealing with, where it looks as if that there are people from a certain country that's engaged in a conflict right now that are basically just being denied U.S. visas under a very interesting strategy where they're being told that they cannot overcome a presumption of immigrant intent. And by doing this, it's kind of almost become this blanket justification for a denial where they're just saying 214B. No presumption of you have not overcome presumption of immigrant intent. Therefore,
Mhm.
you are not able to qualify for, let's say a B visa to the United States. My wonder is that a strategy that could potentially become weaponized moving forward as the conflicts in the Middle East increase? Hopefully, they don't increase, obviously, but it's pretty hard to watch the news every day and see what's going on, and think that the next 4 years are going to be really chill, and not involve more foreign conflict. But does that conflict create an even higher inclination and desire in the United States for this protectionist nature, where you're basically saying like we're severing ties, we're keeping Americans in their bubble, and we'll let people in from a couple different countries, but other than that, we're just staying with what we're doing. Maybe I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that's
Yes,
something I've now been worried about. I'm starting to
yes,
think
I
about,
can only imagine.
right, what is the impact specifically of what country you come from and your immigration, not even how you qualify for something, or is it a valid petition? That I think is going to be on the table as well.
Right, right. And I mean, we've seen a lot of cases and a lot of announcements about becoming anti-Muslim and not allowing, I mean, countries with major religion as Muslim, not to allow them to come in to the country.
Right.
So, and plus, like what you were saying about the case, I mean, imagine, you being denied a visa in spite of doing everything right, having all the
Yeah,
documents
I
correct.
mean, I'll just come out and say it. It's pretty much being talked about already. I'm talking about people from Russia, just specifically.
Yes.
There's been
Yeah.
a big increase in 214B visa refusals, specifically for people from Russia. It's a blanket denial, basically, that's being issued, and I'm kind of wondering, how is this strategy employed moving forward with other countries in the event that those people from those countries, their countries embroiled in a conflict. So we'll have to see. But like you said, the so-called Muslim ban is another issue that's something that's probably going to get attention coming in day one. So we'll have to see the impact of that as well.
Right, Justin. Thank you so much for taking that up. I think we
Mhm.
should get back to Malu because he has another question for us on YouTube asking wage levels won't get enforced for H1B. I know H1B visa employees working for $70,000 per year, whereas citizens working for client for same position has double the salary.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're asking about uh, wage levels being enforced, the wage levels should be enforced because you have to pay a specific wage level based on where somebody's working and residing. Where they sit
Mhm.
is what's going to dictate the amount of money that they're paid for the position, based on what kind of position that is in the labor condition application. There's really two ways that USCIS and DOL can attack and attempt to undercut wage levels. The first of which is when you apply for a position, you have to determine what the wage level is at the outset of the filing. There's four wage levels. Wage level one is entry level, experienced, quasi managerial, high level. Four across the board. USCIS has the ability to question whether or not the position qualifies for the wage level provided. They've done that pretty stringently when it comes to what's called level one wages. So that's the lowest wage level. Basically, that level one wage level is only applicable at this point to absolute entry level positions. People just out of college with degrees that are maybe just now starting to work in their specific industry, they maybe have internship experience or something like that. But as a result of that, you can't use level one to go in and undercut a position that doesn't meet that standard. So that's the first way in which you're really not able to game the system as much as it could have been gamed in the past. The second issue is if the company is actually paying someone under what's in the labor condition application, that's a DOL violation and that can be reported. So not only would I tell you, Malu, if you see this going on, not only would I say feel free to report it to the Department of Labor, tell those people that are employees if they're being paid under the amount of money that's in the LCA to report this to the Department of Labor because this is a violation. And those companies should be held accountable for what they're doing because what they're doing is illegal. So that's kind of my opinion of how you fix a system that even has like some small issues in it, rather than just kind of make this blanket proclamation that like the H1B system is bad. Understand that there are ways that you can work within the confines of the system. I will tell you this: I file H1Bs all the time. Um, it's been very rare for me to see anybody getting paid 70K a year. I think that is a tough beat at this point to find people that are going to be getting paid around 70K. Even when you're paying on the lower end of wage levels, I think that obviously location matters. If you're in California, you're getting a very high salary. If you're in Iowa, the wage levels might be a little bit lower. So it does depend on where you're located. But that being said, yeah, I think I've done 4 or 5, maybe 6 LCAs last week, and I can't remember one of those LCAs being for 70K. I think probably the aggregate among those was close to 115 to 120, and some of those were even higher. So yeah, I mean, look, is there a notion that the H1B is utilized as a way to undercut wages in the US? I think that yes, that's an assertion that's been made. Can you do that now? In the current 2024 iteration of the H1B? I don't think so. I think it would be very, very difficult to do. And I'll do you one more, Malu. I will definitely tell you this. On top of that being reported to the DOL if someone's violating and paying under that wage level, I definitely think you're going to see a big increase in FD&S visits. I think you're going to see people coming in now. I think you're going to see more officers getting paid to do site visits all across the U.S. to go to client locations or employer locations or even home locations if they're on the LCA, and they're going to be asking those kinds of questions. Things like, "What are you being paid?" Seeing if that complies. All of that stuff. If it's a violation and the company is violating the conditions of the LCA, they need to be held accountable. They absolutely need to be held accountable because that should not be the underlying purpose of why someone is utilizing an H1B.
Right. Right. Thank you so much for taking that up. And I'm sure Malu is very happy with your answer, very detailed. And thank you, Justin, for taking that up. See, he has something to say already. Many of us have been replaced by H1B visa employees. So H1B wage level need to increase to 120,000 to minimum.
Okay, well, I mean,
I
that's
hope
what you're
so.
asking. You're asking me, you're saying, do H-1Bs undercut the wage level of U.S. employers of U.S. employees? I've come back and said no, and now you're saying, well, the wage level's now gone up to 120K minimum. Well, that means that the wages are higher. So I'm sorry, I don't really know how else to answer your question. The underlying purpose was to prevent wage abuse, right? By hiring people that are paid less money to do the same job. So if that's no longer the case, then it seems that the program is being implemented in the way that the people wanted it implemented in.
They say they need to increase it to 120K minimum. So okay, I think that's what he. But yeah, thank you so much, Justin, and I hope that Malu, you have your answer to your question. But anyway, Justin, I have my next question, and I think without discussing about Elon Musk, we this wouldn't be complete. So
Yeah.
with Elon Musk advising on government efficiency, do you think his involvement would lead to changes in how immigration processes are streamlined? Or do you think his focus will be on wasteful spending, which will result in reduced resources for immigration service?
So I would definitely say this. USCIS is fee based, meaning that the money that they get is generated by fees that come into them. So in that regard, I don't think you'd see much of a change because they're just going to basically do the same. Pardon my language, but they're going to do the same crap they always do. If they're going to say we don't have enough money, and then we need to raise fees because we need more money, and then processing will stay almost exactly the same, and we'll wonder where the money's going. But in that regard, I don't foresee it being that big of an issue. Musk, I'll be honest with you, he confuses me to a little bit because I don't really know what his long term goal is. For example, I my understanding was that the Trump administration wants to get rid of electric vehicle incentives, which would seemingly be directly harmful to his own organization. And then I've also seen that, one of the agencies that they want to cut funding from is NASA, which I think, again, would negatively impact his SpaceX program.
Yes.
So I don't know if his goal is to somehow put himself in a circumstance where, like, his companies benefit from these changes, but then other people don't. I'm really not sure. Um, yeah, I mean, maybe he does want to be president. Who knows? Well, I don't know if he can be president. I don't think he was born here.
Yes, I don't
Um,
think so.
so I don't know, maybe, but I definitely think that he's enjoying the amount of sway that he has presently,
Attention, yes.
because he's
Power.
in every picture, basically seated at the right hand of Trump. So yeah, I think he's enjoying that. I think him and Vivek, you know, what they're actually able to do and what they say they're going to do are probably going to be two different monsters. Because this really kind of gets back to the whole appointment issues with Trump. It's almost never a matter of just if that person's going to quit, it's a win. Eventually it's a situation where the person gets worn down and just leaves. So we'll see what he's actually able to do versus what the impact of it'll be. When it comes
True.
to like immigration, I've never really heard Musk come out and have any sort of anti-immigrant sentiment. I mean, I can definitely tell you through the grapevine that Tesla utilizes a lot of employees that are on NIV visas.
Yes.
So I definitely think that he's someone that benefits from the H-1B program. So it'd be odd to see him kind of bite off his nose to spite his face or whatever the term is. But yeah, we'll have to kind of wait and see. I would be surprised if it has long ranging impact on immigration. The things that could have an impact on immigration for him from a business immigration perspective are what are the implications of these kind of cuts to government contracts, and government projects. Because I will say that I've worked with companies that there may be a consulting company who the third party is actually a state agency, and what is the impact of that funding that's coming from the federal level to the state level for that project, and does it mean that they cut employees or whole cloth get rid of that whole project in the first place? That's something that I think could be a problem. But but it's going to have to just be kind of wait and see. I mean, I know that they introduced a couple of policies that they want to talk about, but it's all broad strokes. There's no actual how to of it, and until that really comes forth, we're not going to have the full scope of the picture. But yeah, I mean, hopefully, out of everybody, Elon's at least the only person in Trump's ear saying, "Hey, immigration's a good thing."
Yes. Thank you so much, Justin, for that view. Well, I have few questions on, our Facebook groups and also our YouTube channel. So let me see if I can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could try to do like one or two, but I am
Sure,
cutting time pretty closely, to be honest.
sure, sure. So let's go with quickly. I mean, these are just comments. Maybe you can just tell us your views on these. So this was on our channel saying, so conservative Republicans support people immigrating legally, but the border has been invaded by unwanted and the poor. We cannot financially support people who never put into our tax system, but wants the
Yeah,
financial benefit
I,
as a worker recipient. Yeah.
I think the there's a pretty easy way to just say what this person's saying. Trump wants to block illegal immigration from coming in. People validly understand that undocumented immigration is a problem in the United States. The system does not operate efficiently, and it doesn't operate the way that it's supposed to. I
Mhm.
personally will even go one step further and say when people that are immigrating to the United States come in and they're working on work visas, I think that it's a little bit ridiculous that part of the employer's job now is to throw an extra $600 into their petition, specifically to deal with issues at the border. The so-called asylum fee that has been added into these employment-based applications, I think is unfair. I don't think that it's necessarily appropriate for legal immigration for people who are sponsoring people here in valid non-immigrant statuses to have to take on the additional burden of dealing with problems that are occurring at the border. I understand that frustration. I also think that it must be incredibly frustrating for someone who has been in this country legally for 10 or 15 years that is still sitting here waiting for an opportunity to apply for a green card, be told that, the big issues in this country aren't you. The big issues in this country are people coming in from the southern border and, claiming asylum. And that's really where everyone's attention is going to lie. So I understand that anger. I get it. What I don't understand is this disconnect that seems to exist for some people that are here legally, that have immigrated here legally. This disconnect that Trump only has issues with illegal immigrants and Trump's only going to be creating enforcement activities that only goes after people that are in the country illegally. Donald Trump may believe that in his heart and soul. Stephen Miller doesn't. And Stephen Miller is the person that's going to be architecting the policies that are going to dictate the next 4 years.
Yes.
That's where the disconnect I see gets frustrating for me, because I
Mhm.
really don't want to hear people complaining when we're a year and a half into this process and legal immigration has gotten more difficult. I don't want to hear the complaints about, oh, well, I didn't think this was going to happen. We were telling you it was going to happen beforehand.
Yes.
So I don't
Right.
want this head in the sand crap that is inevitably going to spew up as a result of that. So yes, to this person's point, I get it. The southern border is a mess. It needs to be addressed. Honestly, it looks like it was pretty high on the list of reasons why Trump won. And that's something that he's going to be tasked with fixing over the next 4 years. We'll see how he
Mhm.
does. I hope he does well. I hope that we're able to create avenues that create positive results where we're able to curtail this problem and make it better. I also hope at the same
Right.
time he does things that benefit legal immigration. But
Right.
we will see. Is it likely? No. So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say in relation to that comment.
Thank you so much, Justin. That was really valuable. And this next one is, I hope Trump bans sanctuary cities and ban illegal immigrants from getting any benefits from America.
Okay, we're kind of we're spinning on the same wheel that we were on
Yeah,
previously.
I hope so also. So,
And look, I get
yeah.
it. Like, there's definitely going to be a lot of showdowns that happen over the next 4 years with illegal immigration. There's going to be issues related to state government versus federal government. The enforcement of immigration by local officers, I've already seen as an issue that people are bringing up. The idea of sanctuary cities being challenged or being brought up as well. All of this, in my opinion, really comes back to this notion that um, all of this comes back to the notion of people who came here the right way are frustrated that people who didn't come here the right way are getting benefits, and they're getting, it's a feeling of animus that I'm trying to do things correctly, I see people not doing things correctly, but those people not doing things correctly seem to be getting more attention and a better break in terms of benefits than what I'm receiving. Okay, I
Right,
hear
right.
that frustration, I understand it. um, all I can say is what I do professionally, and what I've done professionally over the past couple years, dealing with this exact administration and what we're going to deal with its new iteration. You're not going to just escape the impact of immigration policy changes merely by
Mhm.
virtue of entering the country legally. It's not going to mean, do I think that Trump's going to hunt down everyone that's on an H1B and deport them? No, of course not. That's not going to happen. But we are going to see a tougher 4 years play out than we have seen under the Biden administration. And that's
True.
just a fact. It's going to be what we deal with. And that's regardless of what they do with illegal immigration.
So true.
So if you are happy that these changes are being made in relation to legal immigration, okay, that's great. But do understand, if you are an immigrant and you are in the United States right now, or you want to immigrate to the United States, the world that you're going to be looking at by the middle of next year is going to be very different from the world as it is what we're speaking about presently.
Mhm. Right. I think, thank you so much, Justin, for that. Last but not the least, if you would just like to take up this last comment from Rag, will legal immigration get a day one surprise, or could there be a bit leeway?
I genuinely don't know. I mean, I don't think it really makes sense for them to come out and make drastic policy changes in relation to legal immigration on day one. I think they're going to want to serve the master, which is the masses, in their desire to make changes at the border. So I really think that's going to be what policy A is for them, is going after making whatever changes they think are necessary. I think they're definitely going to reinstitute the Remain in Mexico program. I have heard that they are trying to institute a similar program in Canada. So that'll be interesting, because I didn't know that there was a lot of people trying to come in through Canada to claim asylum. Usually you hear about it coming from Mexico. So I know that
Mhm.
those are going to be things that they're probably putting in at the outset. I definitely think that the family separation thing is going to be big, and then how they handle different policies with removals, and stuff like that. That's all going to be big. That's going to be, like I said earlier in our call, that's going to be what gets the eyeballs. You know,
Mhm.
what's not going to get the eyeballs outside of the immediate community that handles immigration on a day-to-day basis are going to be the policy changes that they implement throughout the duration of the 4 years that they're in. Because I think look, obviously don't agree with the things Stephen Miller does, but have to give some level of credit where credit's due. He's had 4 years to sit on the things he did last time, and he's had an opportunity to probably make changes and corrections to things that he was not able to get done before. So
Mm.
you're gonna
Yes, we can put it
see,
that way.
you're gonna see somebody that's coming in with plans and ideas that he's going to want to implement. But yeah, maybe day one, like, will there be 150 RFEs issued the day Trump takes office? No, I don't think so. I think you're probably looking at more of a slow burn.
All right. Thank you. And Rag already says, thanks to Pasa and Justin. Great updates. Thank you,
Thank you.
Rag, for
Yeah,
participating.
thank you for your time. I'll try to come on next time we get together with just like something more positive. Uh,
Sure.
just
Sure.
that
But
that way
Justin,
we have a
it's
little more
really,
energy.
yeah,
Yeah,
but seriously always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. Today was great. I mean, it was a great and interesting discussion about all these picks that Trump has made in his new team. So thank you
yeah.
so much, for doing this today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. You guys have a great week. Have a great
You
Thanksgiving.
too.
And I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, me too. And here's wishing you and your lovely family a very happy Thanksgiving as well. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye bye. So, folks out there, thank you so much today for joining us in this very important discussion. And it was great having you. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. We are on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and also on X. So, thank you so much. And stay tuned because we have more webinars lined up. And I think in just 15 minutes, we're going to have another. So, yes, watch out. Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. It's Nipasa saying bye for now.